Welcome to another episode of the Clean Earth Energy Podcast, and this week it's California Love. Okay, so let's talk about California. So California just unveiled its offshore wind target, and it's a big one. Yes, their offshore wind target is currently the largest in the US. Their initial target is 3 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2030 and up to 15 gigawatts of offshore wind energy by 2045. Previously, the record was held by New York State with an offshore wind target of 9 gigawatts by 2035. So that's a huge announcement by the state of California as it relates to leveraging wind energy to supply their electricity needs in the state. The other reason it's a big announcement is because the state can power up to 15 million homes off of offshore wind energy if it meets its targets. So it sounds all good, but it is quite challenging as well. So most offshore wind installations are in fairly shallow waters. That's usually up to a depth of about 150 meters using monopiles. And you can find that most offshore wind energy installations around the world are using a monopile type of installation. And what that means is just a single pile driven deep into the ocean bedrock or the sea bedrock, wherever that installation occurs. Still quite challenging to implement that technology. But for California, it's different because California has very deep waters, meaning that they will mostly leverage floating wind. So floating wind is a technology in which, effectively a structure floats, which the wind turbine is attached to or installed on, and to generate wind electricity or wind energy using that type of installation. Currently, it's a pilot technology. It's being piloted in Europe, and I believe it's piloted in parts of Asia, Taiwan, and China as well. Japan is also exploring it. So for this kind of announcement for the state of California, not only is it big in terms of what it means in terms of energy potential, but it is a very challenging undertaking to implement offshore wind in the state of California, and it also means it's going to be quite expensive as well. But the other component to doing it is the state of California has a 2045 target to have all of its power generation be carbon free by that point. So if California is successful in implementing offshore wind, that's going to be a huge step to meeting their net zero power generation or carbon emissions goal in that particular state. So what do you think about it? I think also there's another component that I didn't mention to this is that the economic benefits as well, the job creation as it relates to developing an entire industry around offshore wind, whether that be sort of the engineering, the design, procurement, the construction. Also, California is a coastal state, so a lot of these wind energy installations are going to require sort of coastal side type of industrial facilities for the fabrication of the floating structures, the assembly of the wind turbines as well, and then also for the vessels. So that's going to mean a huge amount for the state of California in terms of its labor sort of sector and also its economic sector. And then, of course, the benefits that it provides ultimately to consumers and businesses in terms of an additional supply of electricity. So again, so what do you think about that? Do you think it's something that's feasible? Do you think that it's something that California can achieve by 2030 and 2045? What other considerations are there? I think the other component as well is California is known for its tech industry. And I think for sort of the energy industry or the renewable energy industry at large, it could have, again, sort of a huge sort of innovation component as well, in that there are going to be lots of climate tech or green tech companies that naturally sort of evolve from this sort of industry that can be born out of California's announcements. So I look forward to what's ahead for the state of California, what it relates to or what it means for the offshore wind energy. the offshore wind energy sector, and then ultimately the state of California and what it does in terms of it achieving its net zero goals. Okay, so while we're on the topic of wind energy, let's talk about Vestas, which is one of the leading wind turbine manufacturers. So they just announced a 4 megawatt wind turbine that's really an evolution of their V150 4 megawatt wind turbine. This one's called the V165 4 megawatt wind turbine. And so why is that really important? Well, it is an evolution of the V150 technology, but the V165 is designed to operate in areas with medium to low wind speeds. So the turbine has been sort of engineered or evolved from the original design to operate in medium to low wind farms or wind environments. And what does that mean? Well, you can put wind turbines in places where it really was not or where they were not optimally suited previously. So Vestas is targeting places like South Africa, India, parts of the U.S. as well for this type of application, and that means a lot as it relates to the energy transition, because now you can start to place these turbines in places that were thought previously not possible. And so it will be interesting to see sort of what the response is to those particular wind turbines, whether it opens up some new opportunities for placements of wind turbines, wind farms, and so on. So definitely watch for that from Vestas. And I think, again, going back to the point about California, we're really looking at an acceleration of the energy transition with offshore wind, with improving wind turbine technology, being able to get more out of the conditions as it relates to windy areas or not so windy areas. So very curious to see what the response is like to the Vestas wind turbine, and which type of, or which countries that were previously not considering sort of wind turbines might start to consider it with Vestas new technology. So stay tuned for that. We might hear some pretty interesting announcements from around the world, from countries or locales that are now considering wind energy because of the Vestas turbine. All right, so the next topic I want to get onto is recently there have been reports about utility companies, particularly U.S. utility companies, pushing back against people who have rooftop solar on their homes. And this is becoming quite an issue in many states across the U.S. Mississippi most recently, the state of Florida. We've seen this in South Carolina as well, and then also in the Midwest. And why is this an issue? Well, typically when a homeowner installs rooftop solar on his or her home, if there is excess power generation, that is sent back, or it can be sent back to the electric grid. And what that's called is net metering. Well, there's an issue with that. Historically, under net metering, the electric grid would pay the retail rate for the electricity that the homeowner is providing to the grid. Well, first issue now is that many electric grids now don't want to pay the retail rate. They want to pay the wholesale rate, which is a fraction of what the retail rate is, number one, and also is not providing the homeowner any benefit to installing rooftop solar on their home when you consider the cost of the installations and the fact they are generating so much electricity, and they are actually helping the utility by reducing demands on the grid, but then also being able to provide power to the electric grid or to the utility operator to power other homes. So this is becoming quite an issue. So for example, in the state of Mississippi, currently there's sort of a bit of a battle between homeowners and the utility companies as it relates to rooftop solar. But the issue is really so bad that there are only 600 rooftop solar installations in the state of Mississippi. So effectively, this dispute or this conflict between homeowners and the utility companies really is stifling the uptake of rooftop solar on residential installations in the state of Mississippi. If we move on to Florida, the utility companies try to sort of outright sort of eliminate any sort of incentives to homeowners with solar on their home. Now, Florida being the sunshine state, obviously very sunny state, so quite optimal for solar energy generation. And the utility companies were actually successful in sort of eliminating those tariffs to the homeowner, but Florida Governor Ron DeSantis vetoed that sort of that act or that bill that would have allowed the utility companies to see incentives or any sort of benefit to the homeowners. And so Governor DeSantis argued that would absolutely be harmful to consumers to eliminate that benefit, especially considering in the state of Florida, where again it's such sunny conditions, and many residential homeowners can benefit from having rooftop solar and then also providing the excess generation back to the grid. So what's really sort of underlying this? Why is this happening? Well, utility companies by nature are monopolies. There's typically only one, maybe upwards of a few in a given state, and they are regulated by the state to provide electricity to businesses and to homeowners. And the expectation is that they're going to provide a reliable service to the constituents of the state, and that they are also sort of, kind of restricted from becoming too profitable so that the prices, the electricity prices to customers aren't too high. Well, the problem with that is that utility companies, they are in the business of building power plants and upgrading electric grids and building electric grids, and also looking at ways to generate electricity, and that comes at a cost. And then there's also the operational side of it, sort of again operating the utility infrastructure, maintaining the utility infrastructure. So there are huge costs to the utility companies as it relates to these various sort of operational elements and just how they make a profit as a business or as a utility. But also the other issue is that not only are they sort of providing all these operational expenditures and capital expenditures, but now they're being asked to provide a reasonable benefit to the rooftop solar homeowner, and that's in conflict with their interests. And so it's eating into their profits. It's actually reducing their customer base, because the more people who install solar are people who are less reliant on the electric grid. And so there's sort of a fight here. The electric companies or the utility companies will argue, well, if we're providing all of these benefits to rooftop solar owners in terms of net metering or paying tariffs on the excess generation, then we will have to raise the cost on non-solar homeowners because our cost of operations goes up. So quite a battle there, and there's some leverage that they have as well. As they are very powerful in the states that they operate, being that, again, they are monopolies. So this is quite an interesting scenario, but also if this situation goes too far, it does really kind of, deter rooftop homeowners from looking at rooftop solar as an option because of the cost, because of the fact that there is really no incentive for them if they are generating excess electricity that needs to go back to the grid, or if they haven't done something like install battery storage. But even in that case, they could still be generating excess electricity. So it is quite problematic. So it will be interesting to see sort of what happens on this front here as it relates to rooftop solar and the position of the utility companies. States are intervening in it. Some states have a lot more leverage than other states do. So for example, as I mentioned, the state of Florida, but in the state of Mississippi, you can see the opposite effect happen, where again the maneuvers by the utility companies really are sort of stifling the uptake of rooftop solar in the state, with only 600 residences in the state of Mississippi having rooftop solar. So quite an interesting sort of picture, and seeing how that plays out. So moving on to another topic as it relates to the energy transition is solar. So there's an issue in the U.S. where hundreds of solar installation projects have been put on hold because the U.S. Department of Commerce is investigating whether some solar panel suppliers are circumventing U.S. trade rules. So a little background on this. In 2011, the U.S. Department of Commerce found that China was dumping solar panels into the U.S. market, meaning that the panels were being sold at or below cost, making it impossible for U.S.-based manufacturers to compete. So the U.S. Department of Commerce imposed tariffs of up to 250% on Chinese-made solar panels. So in 2011, the solar industry in the U.S. went from $2.8 billion to $400 million in 2020. And here we are, it looks like we're back at it again. So what the Department of Commerce is investigating is whether China is actually having the panels or supplying panels to countries in Southeast Asia. And these countries would be Vietnam, Thailand, Cambodia, and Malaysia. So supplying components to those countries, and then those countries in turn are shipping the panels to the U.S. To be utilized for solar installations. So this has been sort of at least a ripple in the solar industry after it has sort of a short time ago suffered a huge setback as it related to the dumping incident. Just about 10 years ago, and many solar suppliers went out of business then. And so this is looking like a situation now where sort of project developers, engineers, and even installation operations are being impacted by this current halt by the U.S. Department of Commerce as it investigates this situation. So it is quite a very sensitive situation. It does have political implications to it because U.S. President Joe Biden has a renewable energy agenda in which he wants a substantial portion of the U.S. energy supply to come from renewable energy sources by 2035. And this definitely can be disruptive to his agenda. So it will be curious to see what the findings are. And sort of what kind of pressures are sort of put in place politically, what the impacts are economically, and what that means for the, again, energy transition and the sort of uptake or the sort of continued expansion of solar as it relates to the sort of U.S. energy mix. So very curious, and I'm watching it carefully because I do remember this story from about 10 years ago. So if you're familiar with this story, I'd like to hear what you think about it. If you're new to this particular development, let me know what you think about this situation here. Is it something that is sort of maybe being exaggerated, or something that requires careful attention? Does the U.S. Department of Commerce need to intervene in this, or should we let competitive forces play out? I have my own opinion on it. Certainly, I think companies do need to be protected from dumping in the market, and certainly shouldn't be rewarding companies that have been sort of cited previously for bad behavior, sort of looking to circumvent the rules. So very curious to hear what you think. Again, the solar industry has just recovered from a huge setback just 10 years ago, and seem to be doing quite well. And now there's lots of concern, lots of uneasiness as it relates to the immediate future of the solar industry. So I'd like to hear what you think about that. So that's all for this podcast this week. I hope you enjoyed the topics. Hey, please let me know. What do you think? I'd love to hear your comments about the various topics. So again, offshore wind in the state of California, Vestas new medium to low wind environment turbines, and then also the fight between public utility companies and residential rooftop solar owners. Yeah, I'd like to hear what you think, and what are some solutions that you have for these various considerations, whether it be California or whether it be the rooftop solar fight. So once again, my name is Mark Weich. Thanks for checking out this podcast. Please hit the like button. You can find me on social media, and look forward to bringing you the next one. Thanks for listening, and thanks for watching.